Hi, church family. I'm Sherry Robinson, stepping outside the box and my comfort zone to share some humor with you. Don't we all need to decompress with some giggles? It's a good thing after all. The Bible says in Job chapter 8, verse 21, He will fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouts of joy. Anyone that knows me knows I love to travel, see new places and cultures, and do new things. This short story was in my Mother's Day gift book, Chicken Soup for the Soul. Laughter is the best medicine. And it hit home for me and gave me a giggle. It's called Kiss of Peace, Italian style. The story goes, my husband Tom and I were on a Mediterranean cruise with his cousins Jack and Marilyn. We had visited the Acropolis in Greece, shopped for carpets in the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul, explored the ruins of Ephesus, and we're now docked in our last port, Naples. We decided to search for a Catholic church so we could attend Sunday Mass together. It was a hot afternoon and we were tired, having roamed the hilly cobblestone streets for a couple of hours, searching for a church that wasn't locked up tight. I had this romantic vision of all of us going to Mass together and then finding some quaint restaurant and ordering a big bowl of pasta and sharing maybe a bottle of Chianti at our last port. There are over 500 churches in Naples. You'd think one of them would stay open all day, my husband said. Suddenly there was a noise in the side alleyway and a very young man with thick, slick-backed hair appeared. I smiled. Excuse me, do you know where there's a church? A Catholic church. I pointed toward the sky and pantomimed a door opening. One that's open? The kid stared at me blankly and then said something I couldn't understand in Italian. He held up his hand and his fingers indicating 5 blocks. We thanked him and kept walking. At the top of a hill we found a Catholic church and went inside. The Mass had already started. The church was packed. It looked like the entire city went to only one church, and we'd found it by sheer luck. One by one we genuflected and squeezed into the last open pew, crossed ourselves and knelt down. The ancient church was dimly lit by stained glass windows and ornately decorated with statues of saints and the Madonna. But we were so far back I couldn't get a clear view of what the altar looked like. Nonetheless, I was thrilled to be inside celebrating a Mass in Italian. This is fabulous, I said. Just look at these faces. They're so authentically Italian. A grandmotherly type dressed in a black shawl and a black veil, kneeling in the pew in front of me, turned to inspect us. She narrowed her eyes at me. I gave her my best perky tourist smile, and she returned it with an icy glance and looked away. I felt like I was intruding on her thoughts. I turned to my left and smiled at the man sitting next to me. He put his head in his weathered hands and covered his face. Maybe he was praying that the Americans would just disappear. I elbowed my husband, who was grinning as he watched me to fail to connect with the locals. I nudged him again and I said, I'll win him over, you just watch. The choir in front of the church sang something I didn't recognize, heavenly voices lifting with the organ music. I was swept up in the bliss and transcendence of a world traveler feeling connected to these worshiping strangers. The priest continued his speech from the altar, and although I couldn't see him or understand a word he was saying, I knew from my Catholic school days that the priest had arrived at the part of the Mass called the Kiss of Peace. Caught up in the spirit, I turned to Tom, lifted my chin and kissed him. Then I tapped my elderly lady's shoulders and held out my hand. She held up her bony hands in protest. I grasped her fingers gleefully. She jerked back and gave me a horrified look. I turned to the older gentleman and swept up in the moment, almost high-fived him, but I controlled myself. I was so enjoying this Mass. The Mass ended, and for the first time I could see the old priest as he tottered down the aisle coming toward us. There were 4 men dressed in black, preceding the portly priest, carrying a large black box. Suddenly I realized in horror that it was a casket. Jack leaned over to me and said, Don't look now, Perky, but I think we've just crashed a perfect stranger's funeral and you just high-fived everyone in the family. Well, yeah, that struck a nerve because, that probably would be me. Anyway, back on the ship, we raised our wine glasses in a toast to our unknown deceased relative. I hope you got a giggle out of that. And for a closing thought for my my closing thought for my church family is for you to know you are loved and being prayed for. Like Philippians chapter 1 verse says, in all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy. Keep calm, carry God. Remember to study your memory verse this week and keep smiling.